I'm here on the West Coast. How are you?
Yes, thank you. 7 a.m.s. West Coast peeps represent. Sunny too. For Joel's purposes, this is my car. This is my GTI. This is a 2011 GTI with a plaid interior. There you go. For all you car people out there. And yeah, that's about it. How you doing?
I'm good. When you said, contractor homeowner cape, I've had the homeowner cape on since December. Our basement and kitchen flooded, and then
Oh
all the
no.
ordered, and we have the materials now. So our kitchen cabinets have been in our living room for several months, and the contractor is a contractor, so one day he'll show up again and do something with them. So I feel you on all those things.
Yes, I know. We just gotta yeah, we're at their mercy, right? Like even my painter guy, which I'm super excited about, is like, oh yeah, I'm going away this weekend. So can we just meet today and start on Monday? Yes,
Yeah,
yes, yeah.
it's like it makes me feel like I'm like in my early 20s trying to date again, where you're really insecure and you're like, please love me, please show up, please pay attention to me. I'll sit outside your window like with a boombox. Oh, it's ridiculous. Like,
Did you do all that back in the
no, I've never had any patience, but like, it's that kind of right?
But it's
Like
like that.
that feeling.
Yes, too funny. We met 10 months ago now.
That sounds right. The pandemic has felt like 10 years, so I
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Yes, it does. I mean, in a few ways, right? Where it's like it feels like it's been so long, but at the same time, I feel so comfortable with many of the people I talk with. Like we talk all the time, right? Like it's yeah, it's good stuff.
It is. Yeah, it's weird in the time we spent on the internet when like I mean now everything's kind of reopened at least where we're at, but it's sort of like yeah, technology was I don't know about how it was for other people, but like technology was like my social life for a year
Yes.
is kind of what it felt like. So yeah, it's just it. I mean, I know we're going to kind of talk about identity today, but it kind of goes to that, right? Is like
Hmm.
when you're stuck in your house with your own thoughts for that many months, it really does kind of make you start to think about like, okay, like what do I actually care about? And like how much am I posturing here and how much has that posturing actually served me or anyone around me? That's kind of
Yes.
back to for me when I kind of synthesize it now that I don't know, I can like go places again.
Yeah. So I think I'm behind you on that journey because we're just opening up a little bit in the last few weeks.
Hmm.
And yeah, synthesizing some of that for myself too. Still in that process of like, okay, so are the same things still important to me? Am I saying the same things louder or have I changed what I'm saying?
Yeah. And it's funny because I mean, even in like this reopening, like I my world has not expanded that much. I've been on a plane one time, which was very surreal.
Mhm.
And I've gone basically now my world has expanded in day-to-day life to a coffee shop and the gym. So this isn't like some like great big like
Right.
but it's funny because like that was kind of my life before this. Like I'm not one of
Hmm.
those people who like I have a lot of people who I feel close to, but none of them live near me and I don't like large social gatherings for the most part. And
So
so
you weren't like clubbing every night before pandemic.
I hate clubs. I hate clubs so much. The worst. Don't make me be around lots of sweaty people. It's gross.
How do you really feel? Do you want to talk about that a little? Yeah, too funny. And we spent a lot of time last time on like body image.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so funny. I had actually forgotten about one of the, for lack of a better word, triggers for our conversations initially was when you reposted one of my posts. about body image and men, and just how that was one of the first times, or maybe even just a refreshing time to hear a guy talk about body image or bring that into the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, e- exactly. Yeah, I'm reading the comments
Yeah,
too.
same, sorry. Yeah, so there's a bit of a delay there. Is that what's going on there?
I hear you. I don't know if now are we synced up? Is it working?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Um, but so where are you at with that body image message? That for you, I know you're very authentic in the sense that like that wouldn't just been a flavor of the month thing, but like where do you land on that right now in our dialogue around it?
Yeah, I mean, so it's like to me it's like this multifactorial conversation because anytime you start because there's like okay, like how do I deal with this stuff for myself, right? Like what are
Yes.
like conversations I'm having with myself? Like that's one dialogue. And
Hmm.
then the next dialogue that happens with it is like okay, what are the conversations I have with my clients and their issues with that because this is such a prevalent issue? And how do I not let my stuff spill into their stuff or influence
Yes.
stuff, right? Because it's
Right.
autonomous. And then how do I not, I can feel however I feel, but whatever I feel shouldn't influence their goals or their feelings, right? Like they are a
Right.
different with different needs.
Yeah.
And then it goes into this larger conversation of if you're not part of a marginalized population, right? Like, let's say someone who's bigger bodied, and then you talk about body image, you're like, okay, how can I talk about this in a way that, like, is authentic and real and speaks to these issues, but then also doesn't end up creating more harm than it needs to and creating
Hmm.
like more social stigma than it needs to.
Yeah.
Because like right, straight sized, I guess. I accidentally said on a podcast recently, and I love that now I'm going to repeat this, but it's fine. We're going back to identity. In trying to acknowledge my privilege, because I'm actually half Jewish, I said Jews don't count. And so I'm going to try not to do that anymore accidentally, right? But
Right.
like,
Yes.
right, is a basically a straight sized white girl who happens to be half Jewish, right?
Yes.
Right, I'm still going to have lots of privilege, and
Hmm.
it's one of those identities that you can hide, if you will, right? So
That's the convenience of it. That's the privilege of it.
right, that's the privilege of it. You
Yes.
might realize I'm half Jewish from my last name, but like I don't come across as Jewish. So that's like been an interesting piece of my identity lately
Hmm.
that I hadn't thought about until I accidentally went on a podcast and said, stumbling through my words, Jews don't count. And I was like, ah, shoot. So that's been kind of interesting, right? But
Yeah.
it's like where I come back to in all of this and that giant ramble on this idea of like body image, I think that we all have to decide what works for us,
Hmm.
what we want for ourselves. And I think that part of that is really teasing out like how much of this is outside noise that I'm facing
Right.
and how much of this is within me,
Right.
and, and how do I just separate myself from all this outside noise. And where I come down to is I think a lot of the ways that people end up feeling awful about themselves is we don't have a lot of scientific literacy about how the human body works. And so it's really easy to fall for these stupid, terrible, marketing schemes that are basically promoting like disordered eating and disordered exercise habits
Right. Exactly.
because we don't have realistic expectations, and because a lot of the people who are selling that stuff also don't know how the human body works and don't realize that so much of their own personal experience is genetics. And so it's just kind of like I really think that if we just all stopped commenting on each other's choices and we
Hmm.
sort of the space to make choices that made sense for themselves, we'd kind of all be in a better place. And I just think sometimes this conversation gets really either it just gets really academic in a strange way that doesn't leave space for
Yes.
an experience. Does that make
Right.
sense?
It does. Well, I think I understand, not that I'm justifying, but I understand why it becomes academic because people don't want it to be subjective. They don't want it to be like, this is my opinion. this is what I think. Is like, well, let me back that up with facts, but the facts are shaky, and everyone knows that you can just refer to Dr. Google and find justification for anything under the sun. So it's like even the fact everything that appears to be objective is even still subjective, right? Because I'm just finding facts to support my bends, right? So one of the things, there's a few people here in the chat. I'd be curious to hear from their thoughts on it. Like one is Coach Robin Renee, and she does a lot of work with like women's empowerment and getting outside and just connecting, and also just as a coach with athletes, there's such a focus on performance that moves away from the aesthetic or health or fitness, as you like to say, and differentiating those three, and then just saying like it's really about performance. Where does health and wellness and fitness come in as opposed to just the aesthetic piece? And Dano Heon is another person, another fitness person, Pilates person, and she's pregnant, right? So she's posting stuff through her pregnancy. So you layer in that as well in terms of body image and expectations and stuff. And all these things get messy when we're trying to impose our views on other people.
Yeah. And I think also the funny thing about the facts is that like when we're looking at it from like kind of like a more of a science basis, it's like on one hand, the facts are actually neutral, but we can attach a lot of feelings to the facts. I've noticed this,
Yes, totally.
right? Like to kind of separate it out a little bit, just the steps away from body image, but really all the same thing. It's
Absolutely.
we attach our feelings to whatever the thing is that we hear. So like an example was like my friend and I did a talk where we talked about some of the science of strength, and we just quoted some of the research about sort of bone density and the amount of weight that you would need to lift to really stimulate bone growth.
Yes.
And some people got very emotional about it, right? Where they're like, well, now I'm not
Totally.
enough. I've just started weight training. How am I supposed to do?
Yes,
I can't lift that yet. And it just spiraled. It snowballed for some people.
for sure.
We stepped back and we were like, well, the facts are neutral, but the reality is different, right? Sometimes life is not optimal. And so it's great to have facts, but then you kind of have to go back to whatever that data is and then just, well, that's great and all, but here's where I am and here's where my life is. And so here's where I have to make these choices that make sense in my life.
Yes.
Facts be damned a little bit, like
Yeah.
it's and we kind of have to take personal responsibility sometimes. I think not I know someone's going to get mad at me for this because I'm not trying to victim blame, but like when we get super emotional about something and no one has said anything to us, right? We've seen a piece of data and we get
Yes.
upset.
Right.
I think we have to have a moment where we go, okay, so that's a piece of data. That data is fair, I mean, I know data can be interpreted in a way that's not neutral, but like I'm
Absolutely.
now just reading this thing. How much of me going through something and how much of this is like there's actually something that's happened in this data that's like really off, you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Well, that's identity, that's resilience, that is knowing who you are in the midst of it. Because a lot of times that happens when we read it and we read it through our experience, and if our experience is a wounded experience, then we project our pain onto those things, and then we attack. Right? And that's where it gets ugly. And what you're saying about things being neutral, just facts, it's like social media. We say social media is evil and all these different things. Like, no, social media is social media. It's like money. You can buy drugs or you can help somebody with your money, but money is not evil in and of itself. It's what you do with it that can be evil. It's what we can do with all these things that make it evil or good. So I don't know.
Yeah, and I also think like there's to be human is to be problematic. So like there's a lot of problematic things on social media. There's actually a lot of problematic things in research. Like there's like right like everything that's done by humans is inherently problematic. And so I also think that on a certain level, because we can't solve all the problems of the world, we also have to take a little bit of like personal boundaries and responsibility of
Thank you.
not saying we shouldn't fight, right? I'm not saying we
Right.
shouldn't fight against who do things that are deeply problematic. But
No,
I
but
think
that's
also
advocacy. That's not
they're
solving the
advocates.
world. Yeah.
But I think that we also at the same time need to be like, wow, that social media account doesn't feel good for me. I'm not going to follow it. That gym doesn't feel good for me. I'm not going to go there. That class doesn't feel good for me. I'm not going to do that. That exercise doesn't feel good for me. I'm not going to do it that way. And there has to be a little bit of like, well, this
Yeah.
isn't working for me, so I'm going to remove myself from it because
Right.
we all have different triggers, you know?
Okay. So with that, then, what's the difference between saying that doesn't work for me, I'm out, and rally the troops, let's tear them down, let's make sure that this person never works again because of what they said?
I mean, there's a lot of people in the world, and I think, I guess where I land, unpopular opinion, right? I think there's a time and a place for rallying, but I think sometimes it's more important that we go after the problematic aspects of culture and try to educate people and reach people where we actually can, like people who know us or have a relationship with, than just kind of screaming into the void and randomly attacking things. Because I don't know about you, but I don't think any of the world's problems ever got solved in a comment section.
Right. That reminds me of a post that I put out last year, probably around this time, where I said, I cannot change the world. I can change the world of those in my sphere of influence, my friends, my family, my close friends, my children. I can impact them, but I can't stand, shout from the mountaintops and just like Moses, get everyone to follow me in one way. I don't think I can do that, but I can impact those people that are already in my sphere of influence and hope that they influence the next and they inspire the next and they inspire the next.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And Roxy just put it there. It can provoke thought and even inspire change. Exactly. That's exactly it. So when we shift our mindset towards that, okay, well, who can we inspire? What can we do? Who has what eyes are on us? And let's be accountable to them and move from that space. That's different than rallying the troops and doing these things. I think for me personally, I have a problem with that sometimes because we get so quick on canceling things and axing comments and people and things when maybe sometimes they can be redeemed. Maybe we can just pull ourselves out of that context. Maybe we have to understand where we're coming from and not just pounce, right? So I don't know, like there needs to be a balance with those things, and sometimes it just takes a moment just giving pause and thinking about like where can I inspire and affect change. So
Right. And also I just think this goes back to like autonomy, and not every goal is for every person, and
mhm,
not every approach is going to work for every person. Like
mhm,
um I thought about this the other day, right? A lot of those fitness spaces have those leaderboards where you have like a heart rate monitor. I think I want to say
yes,
Orange does it, right?
yeah,
And they show names, and then instructors yell at you and stuff. Now you
mhm,
can already see how I feel about this. Right? And you're all like supposed to compete with each other and compete with yourself. And it's like, I'm a freaking head case. I don't like that environment, right? I
mhm,
don't want to have to compete with others. Like it stresses me out. I do much better in a setting where I can explore things and challenge things on my own without the judgment of other people and without someone like yelling at me, whether it's like a trainer or an instructor on a screen. But that's me.
right. But the judgment of people or the potential judgment of people.
It's probably the potential judgment of people, but also I have had so many experiences where I've been just yelled at by like an authority figure in one of those, in a setting, right? In a group class setting. I've been yelled at by someone because I did something differently because I needed to for my body, or frankly, I wanted to. Or like, even when I was younger, like in team sports where like someone just came in and was just like I was already flooded and they're like in my face, that like,
Mhm,
I don't want to be in that space. And also I know that I always do better when I don't have that data in front of me in the middle of a workout. Like I prefer to go off of feel because it lets me self-modulate and reflect and see where I am better than if I've got that thing on a screen. And
yeah.
so that's just my experience. But also
Mhm,
I don't think that those workouts are inherently evil. If they work for someone, that's great, but that's not an environment that I want to deal with.
I love the way you said that it's not inherently evil. There, that brings balance to comments like that, because someone who feels like you will be like, yes, Nikki said they're evil and let's roll. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that rhetoric comes out when we don't have that balanced perspective like you. And I personally don't like this, and this is why. Awesome. That actually helps me when I'm working with my clients, when I put them in a situation and one person thrives on that and they have their watch, their heart rate monitor, their phone, the screen, and they're just fueled by data and they can make it me versus me and love it. And the next person is like, everyone in the room is judging me right now, so I'm not going to do it. As much as I want to say to them, no one's judging you. No one's even looking at the screen. This is about you right now, and this gives us some data and some feedback. I don't want that. Okay, that's fine. I understand that vantage point as well, and can
Right.
respect that.
Well, and the fitness industry is a dumpster fire, so someone is judging them. You know what I mean? Like maybe no one's judging you, but there's actually a good chance that someone is. You
Mhm.
know, like I don't think people are that like I don't think people are super great in a fitness setting most of the time. So if people
Yes.
subject themselves to that BS, I
Yes.
support them. And again, I think it's about choosing like what data makes sense for you.
Hmm.
And this goes back to sort of like figuring yourself out. I also know for me that like that data doesn't make any sense because I have the blood pressure and the heart rate of a corpse. And so it's also like if you take all my weird stuff and you
Right.
stick a monitor next to someone who doesn't have that stuff, like
Right.
people are going to interpret my data even though I understand it in a way that doesn't make any sense, and they're probably going to be screaming at me, why don't you work harder? And I'm like, look, my heart rate don't work right, my blood
Yes.
work right,
Right.
like what I think is happening here is not
Hmm.
my internal experience, and I don't know you and you're not bright enough to understand, so like we
Right.
don't need
We don't know
conversation.
to, right, exactly. And it's funny, we talk about privilege in so many different contexts, and this is a perfect example for our audience right here, where there is a privilege that I have of being a male and being in shape pretty much my whole life, where there's a sense of I don't have to walk into a situation fearing judgment. I don't have to walk into a situation and go back to the library of times that people have shamed me or othered me, other than for my skin tone, but in terms of just physical appearance, aesthetic. So I can walk into those and be like, get over it. Like, that's not about you. There's probably no one even looking at the screen right now. Like, people don't understand that data anyways. Like, I can say all those things, but I'm not speaking from a place of trauma in a very respectful way. You know what I mean? Like, there's real or traumas in that, but I respect that trauma.
Right. You just have a different relationship with the leaderboard. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Well said.
And so it's like it doesn't make the leaderboard bad, but it also means that like the leaderboard is maybe not the best place for some of us to be, whether you're someone who again has had trauma, has had an experience,
Hmm.
or like me where it's like I'm sort of like scanning the comment sections here a
Yeah,
little bit,
that's
right?
Alexander Reed. That's my wife making comments there too. So sorry, finish your thought, and I'll come back to that.
Yeah, but again, it just on one hand it would be great if, and I think this is unlikely to happen, but in some of these chains if we could have a more nuanced conversation about the leaderboard and why the
Hmm.
leaderboard is problematic for some people, that
Yes,
would be helpful, right?
that
Because
would be
it's
helpful.
that would be helpful because they could help educate the participants. But on the other hand, because that's probably not going to happen, this goes back to as participants, we have to try to find ways to advocate for ourselves. And depending on how stressed out or traumatized we are, that level of advocacy can shift because
Yes.
it's having gone in and rejected the leaderboard. I'll say it's a very unpopular opinion. The little 25-year-old who was at the front of the room was very confused. She asked me
Right.
if I had injury. I was like, no, I'm fine. I just don't want the heart rate monitor. She said, are you sure? She asked me a whole bunch of questions about orange zones. And I was like, oh, honey, I have an exercise science degree. That doesn't make any sense. I didn't say that to her. I was nicer. I was like, no, no, thank you. Right. Like,
Hmm.
and if
Hmm.
it can be really stressful. And so it's like, this just goes back to that autonomy thing where
Yes.
I wish we understood ourselves better. And I kind of
Hmm.
wish that the understood that we all had different needs better. Because that's where
Yes.
this all, that's where this is all such a dumpster fire.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Someone else is prescribing for us what is wellness, fitness, goodness, right?
Yeah.
Those comments here. So I never coached to those screens when I was an Orange Theory Fitness coach because what they are based off of age and weight, the top two things that people lie about, right?
Yep.
And then Joel's comment, some people get into fitness who were competitive athletes at one time. They often bring that with them when they become trainers. Yeah, I did. I totally did. And I was when I had Coach Marcellus Bowman on last week, pro athlete and trainer, he said that he had that wake up call too, where you start to train everyone like they're athletes playing football, where you just have to dig in and get it done. It's like, well, not everyone's in that dig in and get it done mindset. Like they're there for different reasons, and that's a kind of crass version of it. But we understand that people have different drives and different motivators and different languages when it comes to fitness.
Right. And some of us find that language demotivating, right? Like, I don't identify as athletic. I don't identify as an athlete. I find that whole get it in, get it done. You have to do this very demoralizing because I stress with overworking. And so it's like, for me, again, this is just what I've found like works is I'm like, oh, actually, I do like the get it in and get it done, but I kind of like to do it in this quiet way where I'm like, I'm not talking to any of you. I've got my headphones on. Now I'm in a gym. I've got a mask on, so you can't even see my resting bitch face right now. No one's going to talk to me like this. And I can, and actually, from that space of just quietly doing things without telling anyone what I'm doing is much more comforting to just like blast through stuff than having to be in a room where there's all of these voices and people for me to negotiate because it's just too much. And that's right. My husband and I had a whole conversation about my childhood PTSD yesterday. That's just where I am. But it's like I manage that by not putting myself in environments that don't work for me.
Right. So that's all people have to do.
Well, but it's not that simple because it's like
No,
it took
obviously not.
30 years to get there, right? But it's like,
Right. Yeah.
but I think when you're like really struggling in that space of like, well, again, we can go attack the world. We can go yell at all the people who aren't trauma informed. We can do all these things, but it's
Hmm.
like if you're coming at it from a place of trauma, you can't have a conversation with people that creates change. And so you kind of have to start by putting yourself in a situation where
Yes.
you feel somewhat emotionally healthy. And sometimes that means like being like, I'm not going to engage with these things right now until I figure out my own shit.
Right. Okay, so there's like four paragraphs here I need to read. So,
Yeah.
Kate Cup Corner UK said it's the same in the classrooms. Classrooms with kids, isn't it? A grade C for one kid is an epic achievement given their starting point disadvantage, and a grade C for other kid is a huge fail and disaster. That's a personal journey. Coming from a grade C kid, amen to that. That's exactly it. The next comment was from Dano saying, when people say, oh, wow, you're so big, and point to my pregnant belly, I say the nicest way possible. Every pregnancy is different, and I'm the perfect size for me. Yes. That's a good, well, that's that self-regulation. That's that awareness, identity, and making no apologies for who you are. That's a place that I'm inspired. Before we go on to the next comment, that's a place that I feel motivated, inspired to get people to, is that I, I'm not after you getting a six pack abs. I want you to start from a place of understanding that you are perfect where you are right now. And if you want to make changes to that, let that come from a place of being confident in who you are and where you are first. Make your move from that place as opposed to because you're dissatisfied or discontent with who you are in your skin.
Yeah. And I mean, it's funny, something that just came up, right, when we were reading Charlotte's comment, she's Cupcake Corner. I that made me is that we're all different, right? So it's like I
Mm-hmm.
struggle with athletic environments, I struggle with the leaderboard, but like I have a semi photographic memory, and I
Yeah.
was that horrible A kid who didn't try and didn't give a shit. Like it just school
Yeah.
is me, and so it's like that's where I'm like whatever. It so really
So you're the opposite. It's so funny because like if I was the jock in school that kids hated because like some jock bullied them when they were a teenager, and now I'm like the object of that, you're the A student that showed up on the day of the test and never studied for it and pulled an A when I studied for days and days and days and got a C minus and was happy.
Yep.
So
Because we're all working with a different hand of cards. And I think
yes,
we're
that's
all
the
going to
thing.
find situations really challenging because we all
Yeah,
get handed a different hand of cards. And like, yeah, I have like I can take a test and not understand anything that happened card, but you put me in a situation where I'm supposed to physically excel and I want to curl up in a ball and die. And so it's just we do
right.
strengths, you
Yes,
know?
we're recognizing our different types of intelligence at this moment is what we're relying on right here. So, yeah, that was like for my. I'm just thinking back to that now. Like I felt myself getting like tense just thinking about those moments that I would grind, and my friend Damon, who watches from time to time, would be like, "Oh yeah, we have a test today. What'd you get?" I'm like, "Oh, I got a 77. I'm really happy." He's like, "Yeah, I got a 91," and it's like, "But
And
ah."
but I think that's something that we have to remember, right? Is again, it's like our society, our culture is so stupid in this way of like we're like this is good, this is bad, this is
Mhm.
good, this is bad, and it makes you lean away from anything that you're bad at because you're like, well, I'm just gonna like you don't even want to explore it or try to get better at it because it's just so freaking like, hey Kara, it's
Hey,
just so
Karen.
depressing, right?
Right.
It's like I don't want to be uncomfortable, but it's also I don't know about you, but I also actually get the most fulfillment out of pursuing the things that I'm not naturally good at. Like
Thank you. Yes.
because it doesn't come easily to me.
Hmm.
It's about my ability to learn something because I can just do it like that in my sleep.
Right. But what you're talking about there is you understand your ability, your aptitude to learn, and you have a confidence in your ability to acquire a new skill. So if you have those two as your baseline, then you can throw yourself at anything. And even if you fail, you'll be moderately okay at it. You'll be competent at something. You may not excel, you may not get a scholarship for, or you may not get a job offer because of something you just taught yourself, but you'll be competent. Some people don't have that confidence in their ability to even learn something to put themselves in a situation where they could fail epically.
It's true, and I think that comes back to like understanding yourself first and not worrying about all of this other stuff on the outside, whether that stuff is data, whether that stuff is the opinion of others, right? I think it has to come
Mhm.
back to like, okay, no, like where am I? What
Yes,
am I capable of? What are my genetics?
yes.
Whether it's in your ability to memorize and learn things, and then
Mhm.
understanding that your worth isn't related to that, which is like, I mean, again, I had a lot
Right.
of therapy, right? And then also just being like, when someone comes, if you understand those things, when someone comes at you and they're like, psh, you can also be like, you know what? I know my reality.
Hmm.
This is where I am. This is what I'm working on. And I think it stops for me, it stops that need to like try to compete or be able to do something the way that someone else can do it because I'm just
Right.
like, that doesn't make sense in my world.
Hmm. Jamie Isaac and I were talking about that yesterday, just a sense of you do something and then you pre-qualify it or you pre-justify it just so that to kind of take the edge off in case someone judges you on it. Right? Like, yeah, that's saying Joel, but like if you believe you can't, you're right. Like, that's true. Um, Here's a Cupcake Corner, the second comment here. We'd love to see other measures from a better breathing point of view, to keep their mouths shut and nasal breathe, for example. Get that on the leaderboard. Yes, those intangibles, right? Like, I mean, we think, well, those are still tangible, but like different measurables for success, different measurables for gauging progress.
Can I push back on that breathing thing though? As someone
Sure.
who has a really small mouth, and again, some genetic bullshit. Because again, you put that thing on a fucking leaderboard, I am fucked. Like, it just has to, right? And also the reality of it, right? The
Yeah.
reality of like, okay, I could work on my breathing, but like, there's only so many things in a day that we can worry about. And this
Right.
just goes back to the idea of like, okay, like this is optimal, but this is reality. And the reality is
Yes.
that I'm here and I get to hear
Mhm.
and I this much level of improvement in my life, like fuck
Yes.
being over here. There's only so many things there's only so many freaking tongue exercises I can do in a day. Like it just, there's a lot in our worlds.
There is. I mean, as personal trainers, fitness people, our, I believe our job is to celebrate progress.
Yeah.
And that progress can be millimeters. It can be minuscule. If you have an eye to recognize that and can celebrate that, that's it. That's the whole thing in my mind. So it doesn't matter, like what you're saying, like we don't have to have these big huge goals, but is there progress being made? Is there growth? Is there effort? Is there energy that's being put into all those things? So yeah.
And I think
Funny.
also we have to pick goals and measures for ourselves or help our clients pick goals or measures for themselves that
Mhm.
are relevant to their interests and their world.
Of
And
course.
there's a way
Yeah.
you want to sort of, you're like, oh, they could really benefit from that. You can't, like, we can't just take our agenda and just be like, here you go,
Mm-mm.
right? It has to
Right.
be more of a conversation where they lead in from here, and we kind of we're sort of like, okay, here's where you are, and then we actually
Yes.
figure out how to attach relevance to that. Like, I worked with a client earlier this week where, like, she got a lot of stress and she's been to all the people and she knows all the techniques, and I
Hmm.
said, well, what do you feel like stops you from doing some of the techniques that you know? And she was like, well, I'm not gonna like wake up and gargle water and do this and do that. She goes, the only thing I really feel motivated to do is when it's like a dedicated exercise session, and I know, she's like, I can get on my mat and do something for an hour. And I said, great, well, let's just incorporate something into that framework for you
Hmm.
that you'll actually do every day. And because I don't care how good the techniques are, if they don't make sense in your brain or in your world and you don't want to do them, you're not going to do them, and it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter.
Right. I hope everyone who's watching this, if you're a trainer, applies person, whatever, that you hear the higher level skills that Nikki's talking about here. It's one thing to be able to coach a roll up or a squat or a deadlift or a kettlebell. It's another thing to really hear the heart of the person that's in front of you. And if you're talking about like coaching to the person in front of you or whatever cliche we want to use in the Pilates world, when you actually have an ear and can hear what people are trying to say beyond their words, and you can see where they how they move and what they really need, and meet them at that secret spot of what they say they want and what you see they need, and you can weave both of those in, that's when we're really, really good trainers. That's the thing. That's what I'm chasing after. And I love having people like you on where I hear that and then I go into my next session, whether it's live or virtual, and then I look at people differently. And I listen to them differently and I watch how they move differently. I look at their body language when I do things, and that inspires me to think, okay, let's pause for a second. Do you not like it when we do this? Like, how would this be more effective for you? I know that we've been doing this, you're seeing some progress, but what would make this like a great experience for you? What would help you to do this on your own as opposed to just when we meet? Oh, if we did it like this, okay, let's give that a try for the next week. Like, when we can get those higher level conversations with our people, when we could put our necks on the line and say, how are you liking this? How can I make this better? And risk someone saying you suck as a trainer and I'm finding somebody else, which is probably not going to happen, but you're putting yourself out there for that. That's actually when we get better.
Yeah. I mean, thank you. And I agree, because no, the thing that we have to realize is, like, people really aren't buying Pilates from us. They're not buying kettlebells from us. Like, the reason why they're interested in that is they think it's going to give them something more specific, or, right, you know what I mean? Like, they're looking at it because they're actually trying to make their life better. And whatever that thing is, right? It could be mental health. It could be
Mm-hmm.
like feeling more resilient as you get older. It could be aesthetic things, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's an attachment to it in learning it that's not just like the modality. And I
Yes.
think more that we can sort of understand people and their attachment to it, and also their fears around it and their fears around where it might go wrong for them, or all those things, I just think the better we're going to be in terms of like facilitating people to be empowered to try things and do things and excel in a way that, again, matches wherever they are and takes them up those steps.
Yes. From
That
there. Absolutely.
thing, and then feeling like they just fall on their face or they haven't done enough. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where that nuance is so important.
Yes. I love hearing your compassion and your love for people in the way you just said that. Like that was like, this isn't an angry indictment against fitness professionals. This is a, we really want people to succeed conversation, you
Yeah,
know? So yeah.
because I don't, I mean, all right, there's some charlatans on Instagram, but for the most part, the people who we're interacting with in our industry day to day, no one's trying to give someone a complex about how they're breathing or how they're lifting or, you know, how they're
Yes.
eating, right? It's actually always coming from a place of like wanting to help someone. But I think
Yes.
what falls apart is that nuance, you know?
Yes. Yes. All about that nuance. Um, we I have to close this off soon because in the spirit of having a dad cape on, I need to get to my next appointment shortly. But we had this conversation. Can we talk Momentum Fest for a second?
Yeah.
Um, so we shared some time doing our roundtable, and you also did a class on, was it kettlebells?
Yep.
Okay, cool. And yeah, so how was your kettlebell class?
The kettlebell class was good. It was fun. You know, it was virtual, so we were all kind of smaller groups, which definitely
Mhm.
felt cozier. And people used what they had. Some of them had kettlebells, some of them didn't.
Right.
Uh,
Yes.
I
My
I
TRX
went,
class was the same.
yeah.
Yes. Yes.
I can laugh because the same questions I get on Instagram and with the people who I work with in real life and on my program were the same questions I got there, which was like, what kettlebells do I buy? And I was like, wow, equipment is a real barrier to entry for a lot of us, right? We might
Yes.
be and bands, but you hand us an iron object and we're very confused in our industry. And I
Yes.
don't mean that in an insulting way, truly. But yeah, I mean, it was sort of fun to have an opportunity to be able to show up and teach something that people might not have been exposed to otherwise.
Yes. Absolutely. And I've been saying all week, I love the celebration of all of the tools in our toolbox, right? Like just being able to marry Pilates or yoga or Zumba or whatever it is, dance. Like I use that Roxy's highlight from the year before, right? Like we're all over the place. Like we're not one trick ponies by any means. So I love the fact that we're doing all kinds of stuff and introducing people to different things in terms of movement. So it was good stuff. Really good
Uh,
stuff. And I love your journalism background. We were talking about that too, just like kind of offline. So what you witnessed today was someone with a counseling background in Pilates talking with someone with a journalism background in Pilates. Hence, the conversation flowed so nicely, and you had so many smart things to say. So I really do appreciate you, Nikki.
Likewise. I mean, that was sort of, I think we can round out on this, which was I love that you and we both ended up on a panel for Momentum Fest where there was like a little snafu where we ended up with no moderator. And you know, I ended up being nominated as moderator, which was fine. But the whole time I was like, they would have been fine. They had Martin. He could have jumped in at any point. I hadn't been there.
Yeah, yeah. And I was like, wow, Nikki's killing it right now. I'm just gonna sit back and let her work. Yeah, it was solid.
Let you do it, but Bevan nominated me, and I was like, we're starting. Okay.
Did it. Ready. That's what I'm talking about, staying ready. You are an athlete. You were ready.
I'm yeah, I'm ready when you get to be a nerd, right? Let me sit here with my pen and my paper and my little brochure,
That's
and
my
I'm good.
trauma. That's my trauma right there. That's my trauma. Um, Thank you. Yeah, really good conversation. Thank you so much. Honestly, I really appreciate everyone here. So Lindsay Ray just rolled in. Roxy, Steve Grasset is a friend of mine who's new. Steve, you got to watch this whole conversation later. He's new to the fitness industry. I'm totally starting a new conversation as I'm supposed to be closing here. And our conversation has been around, what do I do? How do I present myself? What I put in social media and all these different things. And we've been trying to craft that message for him in a way which is authentic. And I think that it's fun and exciting to watch someone at that place where it's just like he really is passionate about that new exerciser, those first steps in your movement, fitness, wellness journey. And so then by doing that space and having his own experience of losing weight and getting well fit and being fit and balancing life, work, and family and job, he lands at this place where he's going to have a whole client base of people that is not for the master in biomechanics, it is not for the power lifter, it is not for the whatever. Like, you can start today and craft a niche and do really, really well in this industry by just being yourself. So yeah, so shout out to him. And yeah, listen to everything that Nikki just said for the last 50 minutes because it's pretty good stuff. I think that is it. I'm just looking through all the other comments. Thank you, Joel, and to our Cupcake Corner UK. Get to Work was in the room. Sunny was here earlier. Really appreciate all of you joining us today. Nikki, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's always fun to chat with you. Good luck with all of your capes.
Thank you. Okay, we'll talk soon. Thanks, everybody. Bye.